It was still dark when the quiet streets of Frederick, Colorado, began to stir awake on August 13, 2018. Dawn was only a suggestion on the horizon. Porch lights flickered on like watchful eyes, and somewhere inside the two-story home on Saratoga Trail, silence had settled where the sound of life should have been. Shanann Watts, 34 years old and 17 weeks pregnant, had returned home only a few hours earlier from a late business trip. By morning, she and her two little girls, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, were gone. The house looked almost ordinary. Toys neatly in place, kitchen counters clean, the front door locked. But the ordinary was a disguise for something unspeakable. When Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson couldn't reach her, alarm bells rang. Shanann never ignored calls or texts. Nicole drove to the Watts house just after midday and felt an uneasy chill when no one answered the door. Shanann's car sat in the garage, her purse inside, her shoes by the door. Nicole dialed 911. Police arrived, followed by Chris Watts, Shanann's 33-year-old husband. He pulled up in his work truck wearing a bright orange safety shirt, his face pale but composed. Officers noticed the calm. A husband whose pregnant wife and 2 children had vanished seemed strangely steady, even when he invited them in to look around. Inside, the house whispered of absence. Shanann's phone lay on the couch, her wedding ring beside it. No signs of forced entry. No frantic note. Only a growing sense that something terrible had unfolded quietly. Chris explained that Shanann had returned late, that they had spoken briefly about separating, and that when he left early for work, she and the girls were still asleep. His words were flat, almost rehearsed. He gestured toward the bedrooms, careful to offer help but never quite reaching for it. Detectives began to sense fractures. Neighbors watched Chris on the porch cameras and murmured about how jittery he seemed, pacing, gesturing too much. One neighbor told an officer in a low voice, "He's not acting, right? He's usually quiet." But outwardly, Chris played the role of the worried husband. He gave TV interviews with a pleading tone, asking for their safe return, hands folded, eyes darting. "If you're out there," he said to the camera, "just come back. This house isn't the same without you." The interviews stirred both sympathy and suspicion. Viewers noted how his voice wavered only when talking about himself. Experts in body language caught subtle tells: shoulders rising, a dry swallow, eyes that avoided the camera when he spoke his wife's name. Behind the scenes, investigators worked with methodical precision. They searched oil fields where Chris worked, deployed cadaver dogs, and analyzed phone records. Shanann's friends flooded social media with appeals, painting a picture of a devoted mother and a marriage that, at least to outsiders, seemed enviable. Yet, Chris was living a double life. He had begun an affair with a co-worker, Nichol Kessinger, who believed he was in the final stages of divorce. Their text messages brimmed with flirtation and secret plans. For Chris, the affair was both escape and ignition, a new life without the weight of responsibility. But to reach that life, he would have to erase the one he had. Detectives brought Chris in for questioning. At first, he repeated the same story. He left early, came home to an empty house, but polygraph results told another tale. When confronted with the evidence, Chris asked to speak to his father. In a private room, with cameras rolling, he finally let the first cracks show. I killed her," he whispered. He claimed it was in a fit of rage after Shanann had allegedly harmed the children. It was a desperate lie, a last-minute attempt to shift blame even as the truth loomed. The confession unlocked a chilling reality. Chris admitted to strangling Shanann in their bedroom while Bella and Celeste slept down the hall. He wrapped Shanann's body in a sheet, carried her to his truck, and loaded his daughters beside her. Before dawn, he drove to a remote oil site owned by his company. There, in the lonely expanse of Weld County, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave. Then, in an act that would haunt even seasoned investigators, he smothered his daughters and lowered each small body into separate oil tanks. The details of that morning are almost unbearable. Bella's quiet question, "Daddy, what's wrong with Cece?" before she too was silenced, Celeste's tiny voice calling for her mother. These fragments of their last moments ripple like aftershocks through every account of the crime. Chris Watts, once the smiling father in family photos, had annihilated his own. When the full confession came to light, the nation recoiled. The motive seemed both simple and unfathomable: to start over, free from the obligations of family, to live openly with his mistress. Prosecutors revealed text messages that showed Shanann's growing fear that her marriage was collapsing. Friends recalled her confiding that something felt off, that Chris had become distant, almost cold. They had no idea how far that coldness would go. In November 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder, including the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. In court, he stood in a dark suit, expressionless, as the judge pronounced 5 consecutive life sentences without parole. The quiet in the courtroom was heavy, broken only by the sound of Shanann's parents weeping. The aftermath left a scar that reached far beyond Frederick. For the community, the Watts case became a warning about hidden darkness, the idea that the smiling man next door could harbor something monstrous. For true crime followers, it remains a story of betrayal so profound it defies easy understanding. Chris Watts now lives out his days in a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, a man who destroyed the very lives he was meant to protect. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.